The next administration will be the one ultimately that implements a lot of the distribution of this vaccine and will oversee much of the future of the way Operation Warp Speed goes forward. Why not include members of the Biden transition team as part of this summit that you're hosting today?
Well, we're going to have to see who the next administration is, because we won in those swing states, and there was terrible things that went on. So we're going to have to see who the next administration is. But whichever the next administration is will really benefit by what we've been able to do with this incredible science, the doctors, all of the people that came up, the lab technicians. The work that's been done is incredible, and it will be incredible for the next administration. And hopefully the next administration will be the Trump administration, because you can't steal hundreds of thousands of votes. You can't have fraud and deception and all of the things that they did and then slightly win a swing state. And you just have to look at the numbers, look at what's been on tape, look at all the corruption, and we'll see. You can't win an election like that. So hopefully the next administration will be the Trump administration.
Live from the nation's capital, you're in the War Room. It is Tuesday, the 8th of December, the year of our Lord, 2020. Now with over 22 million podcast listeners, John Frederick's Radio Network, Real America's Voice, Dish Channel 219, Comcast 113, Roku, Pluto, Facebook, everywhere, G News, GTV, many other distribution partners that you can get this in its entirety. And remember, on podcast later, one of the biggest podcasts in the world. That is President Trump finally sitting there and going, hey, why should I include him? He didn't win. I won. They're trying to steal it, but I'm not going to let them. And the American people are not going to let them. Finally, right in their grill. So, spectacular. Got a jam show today. News breaking all over, from Georgia to Pennsylvania to the Supreme Court. We've got, it's also, remember, today is the day of the 79th anniversary of the historic day that will live in infamy speech by President Roosevelt to a joint session of Congress. It is also, that's the 79th, it's the 70th anniversary of the Chosin Reservoir. And we're going to have Patrick Cade, historian, on. Liz Yore is going to be on about Barr in this, designating China as a transnational criminal organization. Colonel Allen West, the combat veteran, now head of the Texas GOP, on this Texas lawsuit in the Supreme Court. Boris Epshteyn from the campaign, but we want to start with a very special individual, really someone who has stepped up to the plate, a typical fourth-turning leader who is now at the forefront of American jurisprudence in defending the rights of the American people to a fair election. The Honorable Lin Wood from Georgia. Lin, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for everything you're doing to defend people's rights. Now, in all the ruckus that went on today, I don't think it was duly noted enough that your lawsuit's actually been filed at the Supreme Court. Can you update us?
I can, and thanks for having me on, Steve. I filed a lawsuit several days after the November 3rd election when I found out that a backroom deal had been cut with the Democratic Party and the Georgia Secretary of State back in March that dramatically changed the rules on absentee mail ballots. And that was never approved by the state legislature. Many legislators didn't know about it until I filed my lawsuit. At any rate, I filed it. The judge did not grant a temporary injunction when I tried to stop the recount, which I said was illegal because the election was illegal. And then I took it to the 11th Circuit, and they said I didn't have standing. I do. A voter has standing because, in my case, the rules of the Secretary of State were not approved by the legislature, and that's unconstitutional and unlawful. So it diluted my vote, and it will have diluted again in the runoff on January the 5th, and it denied me equal protection. I filed a writ of certiorari last night. It was hand-delivered by hard copy today at 12:31, and I have a lot of hope that the court will take it.
Let me ask you, this is your lawsuit gets to the heart of this kind of Stacey Abrams secret deal that was approved by Roethlisberger and is trying to be hidden. That's why they don't want this to come forward. Is this the only place it's currently being argued? Because to me, if we don't get in back of this and bring it to the forefront and have a ruling on this unconstitutional secret deal, you're going to be stealing elections in Georgia from here on in. The 5th, I don't even know how you put up a a defense on the 5th of January. This is what I keep saying. Until Lynn Wood gets into court and gets a ruling here, or the General Assembly calls a special session and they just wimped out today, show complete cowardice down there in Athens and other places, the delegates after the president talked to them. Is the only place we're going to get this in your lawsuit at the Supreme Court?
Well, the issue in my lawsuit is going to be the key. Texas, the state of Texas, filed a lawsuit filed a petition in the Supreme Court today or last night also, and they're taking in essence the same position versus several other states claiming that it diluted the state of Texas voters' vote. So if you look at the swing states, you're going to find that in almost all of them there were deals cut. Sometimes the governor changed the rules. Sometimes they said the county voting districts could change the rules. But they slipped this in several key states without it being approved by the legislatures, because they knew in the open discussion with sunlight on it, the state legislators would not agree to it. So they did try to slip it in the dead of night. Perkins Coie, Hillary Clinton's law firm, was involved in the Georgia deal. They were involved in every one of these deals, and they are involved in every lawsuit where we are trying to find the court rule that we can look at these machines and look at these actual written ballots. They're fighting us tooth and nail. What are they hiding? I'll tell you what they're hiding. They're hiding clear evidence of fraud, but despite their efforts, Sidney Powell has developed a mountain of admissible by affidavit, video, testimony that shows the election was stolen by fraud. It cannot stand, Steve, not in America.
So tell me, what's your overall view of the Texas litigation? You're focused on one state and trying to get this overturned in the state of Georgia. From a legal perspective, what do you think of what Texas did? Because it kind of hit like a bombshell today.
I think Texas' theory is the same as mine. I think it's solid. I think there's Supreme Court law is there. It's what Justice Alito relied on when he issued his first order to Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago. Only the state legislatures can change the rules of a state election on a federal issue, such as the President of the United States. It's a federal election conducted by the state, but it has to be done by the legislature. That's what Texas is saying. That's what I'm saying. The question is, who has standing? I haven't looked into the issue of Texas in terms of standing, but I know that the people have standing. A voter has standing. It was my vote that got diluted. It was my equal protection that got violated because they made it easier to vote by absentee in terms of lax verification of signatures. I had to go through 3 verifications. I had to sign my name. I had to give them a proof of my ID with a picture. They ran my signature against the original voter registration. They didn't do that on the absentee ballots. That's an unequal protection issue, and the dilution of the vote issue is equally solid. This was an illegal election in Georgia. I believe the court has to rule that it was unlawful and illegal, and then Georgia's going to have to get its legislature back into session to deal with it, or they'll disenfranchise every voter in Georgia. Georgia's about to bust down here, Steve. This governor and the Secretary of State and the Lieutenant Governor are corrupt. They've been corrupted by Chinese money, and they are not representing the people's interest in Georgia. They're representing the people's interest in Beijing, China. It will not stand in the state of Georgia.
As bad as your 3 senior executives have been, and it's been pretty embarrassing to see them on CNN and MSNBC night after night with the smirks and the smugs, making these proclamations against the people of Georgia, against the deplorables, against the Trump movement, the people of the United States, voters, and the president. The legislature today, both in Athens with the Senate and then Ralston and the leadership that the president actually spent time on the phone with, are you stunned how cowardly they've been? And we've heard the word is that the reason they don't want to go forward, they're afraid of being doxxed by the left, of being called out by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and CNN, which is headquartered down in Atlanta. They're just basically afraid of being exposed for standing up to the Constitution by the progressive left. How does that set with you, given all the grief that you've come under?
Well, I can tell you that the legislators know that they're really protected if they look around, because the people in Georgia, we the people, we support them taking action. Here's what happened in Georgia. The Senate, for example, needs 29 votes to call a special session, and then the House, the Speaker of the House, David Ralston, said, well, if the Senate does it, the House will do it. But here's what happened. At a meeting last night where they had 20 senators ready to act, they only needed 9 more. Lieutenant Governor Jeffrey Duncan came in there and he browbeat and bullied those senators, told them they'd lose their committee chairmanships, they'd have no authority under his rules under the new Senate, and he beat them down to where 8 dropped out, down to 12. And then David Ralston, who's also corrupt, Ralston then comes in and says, well, the Senate's not going to do it, so we're not going to do it. It's the people in the Republican Party in Georgia that are sabotaging the efforts of the people to get their election honestly resolved, because Donald Trump won Georgia by a historic landslide. The people know it. They're not going to tolerate these political games being played by the politician officials who've got their own financial interests involved and who've got their own political ambitions involved. These people do not stand with Donald Trump and the people. Their futures in Georgia politics are over.
Lynn, you're at the Supreme Court now.
And a lot of them may end up in jail, Steve.
Today's the safe harbor. You've got the 14th coming up. Can you give the audience any sense of what you think the timing is going to be of your case in front of the Supreme Court?
Well, the Supreme Court will do what it's going to do when it's going to do it. I'd like to think that they realize this country is on the brink of disaster. This country is divided. China's trying to get us to be divided. They want a civil war in this country. I've never thought this was about an election. I thought this was a color revolution. Part of it was to send COVID over here, create civil unrest in our cities. Then they have a disputed election followed by violence in the streets. That's a color revolution. That's the playbook that's being followed here. So the Supreme Court's going to have to act as soon as possible. Those deadlines are not in concrete. They can be changed by the Supreme Court. The only date that's in concrete is January the 20th of 2021.
Lynn, how do people follow you on social media?
Well, I'm on Twitter until they kick me off. I'm at Linwood, Linwood. And on Parler, I'm at Linwood, Linwood.
Lynn, you become
I spend a lot of time working on these cases, and I spend a lot of time talking on social media because they put us, Steve, in an echo chamber.
Yep.
The mainstream media is not telling people about the fraud. We've got to get beyond the echo chamber so that the mass of Americans can know that China, combining with other people, stole our election. They're not going to be successful. They're trying to take over our country to get our land because they can't feed their people off their land.
Lynn, we got to bounce. Lynn Wood, the hero that's at the Supreme Court now. Hopefully that case will be heard in the next couple of days. Lynn Wood, you've got a social media handle. Make sure you follow him. His Twitter feed is electric. We're going to take a short break. We're going to talk to the campaign, one of the senior lawyers, and go through exactly what is going on in every state right now from the Trump campaign perspective. Be back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back live on Capitol Hill. You're in the War Room. Lynn Wood just throwing down, talking about the color revolution that the Chinese Communist Party and others are trying to get going here in the United States of America. Okay, I want to turn now to one of the campaign's senior lawyers, Boris Epshteyn. First off, Boris, how is it working out with our hero, Rudy Giuliani, in the hospital? How's the day-to-day operations? Is the mayor still on top of things?
He's 100% on top of things. I'm glad to report that the mayor is doing great. He's feeling great, and he's continuing to be the champion of the legal votes in this country and free and fair elections in this country that he is. So under his leadership, the ultimate leadership of President Trump, we continue to push forward and fight to make sure that this election is decided based on the actual legal votes cast across the country. The mayor's doing great, and we're all wishing him a quick and speedy recovery. I've had the honor of talking to him throughout the day today, so he's in good shape.
Texas surprised everybody, I guess, last night about midnight. They dropped a bomb. People are now focused on it during the day. They're taking. They want to take all of the battleground states that the state legislatures looked the other way, either cut secret deals or looked the other way while deals were being cut. What do you think about this? Is this grandstanding on the part of Texas, or are they really coming to the rescue here?
No. The great, beautiful state of Texas is doing the right thing. And I'll tell you this, their Attorney General, Ken Paxton over there, is a smart man. He's a determined man, and he's a man who stands for the Constitution. And if you look at what happened in Georgia with that horrible consent decree, which is completely extra legal, it's completely outside of the realm of what the Constitution allows. What's happened in Wisconsin, we've talked about that over and over again, where we now know from our recount that 221,000 votes were cast illegally outside of Wisconsin in contravention of Wisconsin law and the Wisconsin Constitution. Michigan, where Wayne County was a total disaster with 71% of absentee precincts unbalanced, which means a difference in the amount of people voted and those who signed in to vote. And then, of course, Pennsylvania, where its mail balloting system allowed for over about 700,000 votes to be counted without inspection, without observation. These votes, these illegal votes, illegal processes absolutely dilute the states where a legal voting process was held. So this is a very interesting lawsuit. It's very innovative. It is going straight to the Supreme Court because of what's called original jurisdiction, which means when one state sues another, or in this case, one state sues four other states, it is incumbent upon the Supreme Court to hear that case directly. It doesn't have to go through the federal court system of district courts, appeal, circuit court of appeal. It goes right to the United States Supreme Court, the High Court.
It's pretty stunning. You know, we had Lynn Wood on here at the beginning that we're this far into this, and so far on the merits, you know, they're banging on Lynn Wood about his standing, but they won't talk about the merits. But this consent that Stacey Abrams cut in a in the dark of night deal behind closed doors with Raffensperger and the wimp Governor Kemp, right? You can't get a day in court on this thing. Now, Lynn Wood's now filed to go to the Supreme Court. The Texas lawsuit also has it in there. But this is so egregious. How can we have a process where you just can't even get to court to argue this, the unconstitutionality of it?
Well, the processes that are set up are convoluted and they're difficult. But here's what I do know. Is if you look at what this Texas lawsuit is alleging, it is serious fraud across these states, and it's actual fraud, it's actual injury. You know, you've already got these quote-unquote legal experts talking about, oh, well, you know, this should have been adjudicated a year ago or 2 years ago. But we all know if that lawsuit would have been brought before the election, they would have said, well, there's no actual injury. But now there's injury. We know that there's been illegal voting, that there's been voting irregularities all across these four states and other states, including Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. We know that happened. There's real injury. And all we want, when I say we, I mean the Trump campaign, the Trump legal team under the leadership of President Trump, and all of the American people want is to know who won the legal vote in this country in this election.
You would think that, you know, you've had this debacle down there today in Georgia with the state Senate and the House of Delegates, where President Trump actually called, I think, the Speaker of the House and called the President pro tem of the House and had discussions with him for, 15, 20 minutes. And then you had the Senate. You had the Senate all set to go. Lynn Wood told us they had up to 20 votes last night. I think they needed 26, 28. And then the lieutenant governor came in and started browbeating them. This lieutenant governor is the one, he's correcting the president. He says, hey, today, I think he tweeted out, your number one duty should be to make sure that we win on January 5th. That should be your number one duty, right? You shouldn't focus on this steal the vote situation. What is going on down in, from your perspective and the campaign's perspective, what is going on with the elected representatives of the Republican Party in Georgia?
The same thing that's going on, sadly, across too many states in this country. The Republican elected officials are not listening to their constituents. The Republican people of this country, and a lot of people who are not Republicans, but specifically the Republican people in this country, the MAGA crowd, are saying loud and clear to their elected officials, listen to us, do the right thing, enact the right policies, be it a recount that has signature matching, be it calling the special sessions of the legislature, do the right thing and make sure that electors are set based on the actual legal votes in this country. And for Republican elected officials not to do that is a dangerous game, because we know that the Republicans in this country, we vote with our ballots. We vote with our feet. And for these elected officials to not listen to the American people, it is not just disappointing, it is potentially career ending. And that should resonate loud and clear with Republicans in Arizona, Republicans in Georgia, Republicans in Michigan, and all across the country.
You've got so much activity going on in every different state. The safe harbor was today. The media tried to make a big deal about it. From your perspective,
the what harbor?
Exactly. That's what I want to ask you. It looks like you've passed through here with lawsuits still going on in Wisconsin, the General Assembly in Wisconsin, the state legislature is going to hear testimony. You've got increased interest in Michigan from the state legislature. Now that you passed the safe harbor, right? Do you think that they've agreed with your theory that, hey, all these dates are movable except for noon on the 20th of January? Are you guys comfortable now that you've gotten past? They're using the safe harbor to basically shut you guys down?
Well, Steve, it's what we talked about yesterday, right? This safe harbor date is for election contest, election litigation to potentially wrap up, right? And if they're wrapped up, something happens. But as you look at the Texas suit, as you look at the ongoing lawsuits in Georgia, in Wisconsin, in Arizona, in Nevada, the litigation contests are obviously not done. The election litigation is not done. So the safe harbor is already passed. It's gone. It's come and it's gone, because we know that the fight to count every legal vote continues. And it's a righteous fight for the very soul of our Constitution, as I told you yesterday, which is the right of the American people to truly and honestly elect our local elected officials, federal elected officials, and of course, our presidents.
If you look around today, as you look at the battlefield, what other highlights do you see? I know we just had the Kelly suit, the Sean Parnell and Kelly suit, got turned down by Judge Alito. We'll have more on that later in the show. But when you look out at these other places, Nevada, Wisconsin, where do you see opportunities right now? Remember, one falls, they all fall. Georgia's sitting down there. There's still a civil war in the Republican Party and the Trump movement to take some action here. Where else do you see opportunities?
Major action in Georgia, as you mentioned. Wisconsin, there's going to be a hearing on Thursday on the vital lawsuit there in state court, where the Supreme Court of Wisconsin gave us a roadmap to go through the state court system in Wisconsin. There's going to be an appeal in Nevada, appealing in Arizona. There's going to be action in Michigan, and we're not giving up on Pennsylvania either. So each of these states have been focusing on that. We're again continuing to look at New Mexico, where we are aware of up to 200,000 votes being either not observed properly or casted properly. And the difference in New Mexico is only about 99,000 votes. So all these states throughout the country, the fight continues, and it's not one we're giving up anytime soon until we know that every legal vote was counted in the United States from the November 3rd election.
Last thing, Boris, before we go, is that what's your sense? You got Linwood's suit up now at the Supreme Court. Alito just turned down the Sean Parnell, Mike Kelly suit. You've got the state of Texas that just filed. You've got a number of suits going through up there. When do you guys anticipate, and I understand the Supreme Court decides when they're going to hear these, but when do you anticipate right now that the Supreme Court's going to start hearing some of the arguments about these lawsuits?
Well, it's tough to guess on that. It's tough to determine that. But what I will tell you is that these lawsuits are full of actual evidence of our lawsuits. The Trump campaign lawsuits are full of actual evidence of election irregularities, election fraud, and they're full of merit. And if lower courts do not decide them the right way, then it'll be time for the Supreme Court to act. We know what the timeline is. We've talked about it. It's really the hard dates are January 6th to a degree in the a joint session of Congress between the House and the Senate, and then it's noon on January 20th when the inauguration is. So we know what the timeline is, and we're going to use all of it to make sure that every legal vote counts in this country.
Okay, how do people get you on Instagram, Parler, and Twitter?
Okay, Instagram's so important because a picture tells 1,000 words. Go to Boris_Epshteyn, Boris_EPSHTEYN, and then Twitter @BorisEP. I'm only about 400 away from 100,000. I was at 50,000 on election day. That is how plugged in we are right now. That's how plugged in Americans are. Parler, the one and only, @Boris. Boris_Epshteyn on Instagram, @BorisEP on Twitter, @Boris on Parler. Thank you so much, Steve. God bless you. You're doing amazing work. I'm getting great shout outs anywhere I go in the country. Shout outs about my time on the one and only War Room.
Brother, thank you. And you can go back to work now for the night shift. Boris Epshteyn, take a short break. Colonel West, the head of the Texas GOP, next.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
In the last reel of many of the greatest Westerns we have, in the last moment, the cavalry finally arrives. We've got Colonel Allen West, a combat veteran, a true patriot. He's head of the Texas GOP. And Texas arrived for the nation today with this amazing lawsuit by Attorney General Paxton. Want to go to Colonel Allen West. Now, first off, Colonel West, last time we left you, you just had the motorcycle injury down in El Paso near our wall. Tell us, where are you in your therapy? Everybody in the audience wants to know.
Well, sure, and thanks so much, Steve, for having me on. Merry Christmas. And it's been about a 6-month process, and that accident happened over Memorial Day weekend, coming back from a rally in Austin, Texas at the Capitol. And tomorrow morning, I have my last physical therapy session, and so I've got about 85 to 90% range of motion back into my right shoulder, and that's about as good as it's going to get. So I'm able to do push-ups and crunches and go out there and knock out a 5-6 mile run, so I'm good to go.
Okay. Tough as boot leather, as I say. Colonel West, walk us through what happened at midnight in this filing of the Supreme Court, and then today. The state of Texas finally arrived. Walk us through the logic of why Texas would sue some of her sister states.
Well, the logic is this. Under the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause, equal protection under law, Texans are severely affected by the fact that you had unconstitutional, illegal actions that were going on in 4 of these battleground states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. What you saw happen in those states were that judges, courts, and also executives taking actions to change election law. And we know that by the rule of the law, by the Constitution, anytime you want to change a law, that should be done through the legislative process. And because you had those things that happened, as well as some other voter irregularities, now we have a result of an election that does have a negative effect on the people here in the great state of Texas. So what the Attorney General filed last night, a little bit before midnight, was a petition, a complaint from Texas based upon those facts that what has happened in those states does have an effect on the citizens of Texas. And I just found out that Louisiana has joined that lawsuit, and there may be some other states that will join that lawsuit. We're not asking for ballots to be thrown out. We're asking for this to go back to the legislature, and the state legislators being the ones that will decide those electors, which again is constitutional by Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution.
Do you think that states like Texas, Ohio, Florida, that were organized and ran this in a professional manner and got these votes counted and didn't allow all this nonsense with these mail-in ballots, particularly ones that had no chain of custody? Do you think across the board that these states have been damaged by this process, by allowing states and these side deals that were cut and deals that were cut with Zuckerberg and allow these left-wing organizations to have direct access into the voter registration to hardwire these private partnerships? Do you think that that damaged the state of Texas and other citizens?
Yeah, absolutely right, and that's the crux of this lawsuit is that citizens here in Texas, legal voting citizens here in Texas, have been damaged by this. And one of the things that it talks about in the lawsuit is how this whole thing about the coronavirus was used, as Rahm Emanuel would say, never let a good crisis go to waste, for the advantage of these universal mail-in ballots. And we fought against universal mail-in ballots here in Texas, down in Houston, Harris County, where you had the county clerk there, Chris Hollins, who was also the treasurer of the Texas Democrat Party, tried to mail out 2.4 to 2.7 million mail-in ballot applications along the registered voter list, which of course the Democrats do not allow you to scrub because they call you racist. So all of these things have come to a head, and this is why we filed a lawsuit. This is not about an election within these states. This is not about a local election. But we're talking about a national level of election that will affect the citizens of Texas and other citizens as well.
You know, what you guys did, Colonel, was so inspiring. I know there's a prosecutor in New Jersey named Eileen that got so motivated. She actually went to, she's associated now with South Carolina. She actually went online and said, hey, I want South Carolina. Look at what these guys did. I want South Carolina to join this lawsuit because Texas is actually standing up for the little guy. How many other states do you anticipate are going to join you in trying to right this horrible wrong of having the progressive left trying to steal this victory from President Trump, the deplorables, and really the American people?
Yeah, I think that you're going to see about 10 states be a part of this, sign on to this petition, this lawsuit. And I know that, as I said, Louisiana has come on board. You just talked about, I believe, Missouri and several others will stand beside this as well. Because, again, this is something that damages citizens all across the United States of America. And this is not a Republican thing. It's not a Democrat thing, independent, Green Party, Libertarian. This is an American issue. And America has the gold standard of an electoral system. And if we do not allow that to continue on, we can't have people losing faith and trust and confidence in our electoral system, because that means you are undermining our constitutional republic.
Colonel West, how do people follow you during the day on social media? Can you give us your Twitter and Parler handles?
Sure. You can follow me through the Republican Party of Texas at texasgop.org. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and you can also follow me personally, Allen West Texas, as well as at Allen West on Instagram, Twitter, and also on Parler.
Every one of our audience has got to sign up for this. Colonel West, you're a great patriot and a great man. Thank you so much. Glad to hear that you're coming back, can do those crunches and push-ups. I know you need that. You live for that. So thank you for coming on here today.
Thanks so much, and go Army, beat Navy.
Thank you, sir. I'm conflicted there. But thank you so much. This weekend, the Army-Navy game, as everybody knows, my daughter's a West Point grad. I'm a naval officer, so we've always had interesting conversations during that contest. Now I want to bring in the top combat historian of his generation, Patrick K. O'Donnell. It is the 79th anniversary of the Day of Infamy speech that basically sent us to war against Imperial Japan after they did the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, which was yesterday, 79 years ago, 2,400 dead, 1,100 wounded. But it's also today the 70th anniversary of part of the fighting of the Chosin Reservoir. And I wanted to bring in Patrick K. O'Donnell. He wrote, I think, one of the most moving books about that endeavor. It's not as well known to the broad scope of American people as it should be. It's known in the Marine Corps. It's known if you're a naval officer. It's known if you're a veteran of the heroism during the Korean War, and particularly the Marines. The book is Give Me Tomorrow. It's absolutely unbelievable. Now the author, Patrick K. O'Donnell, joins us. So, Patrick, tell us about the Chosin Reservoir and why it's important.
Steve, this is one of the Marine Corps' most epic battles in history. 16 Medals of Honor were awarded to Marines in the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. They were outnumbered in some cases over 20-1, and they were fighting in temperatures that were in some cases 30 to 40 below zero with no food or ammunition. And they were surrounded by the Chinese. And this is the winter of 1950, where China threw everything she had against the United States Marine Corps and the Army. And the book that I wrote, Give Me Tomorrow, is a band of brothers on George Company 3-1 of the Marine Corps. And this is their story. They literally helped save the 1st Marine Division by breaking into the Chosin Reservoir, which was surrounded by tens of thousands of Chinese soldiers. And they went up a 11-mile road in a place called Hellfire Valley. The Chinese had an entire division in Hellfire Valley, and they were firing up down upon this small company, 200 men, along with several hundred other men from something called Task Force Drysdale, and they had to break into the main portion or the perimeter of the Marines at Hagaruri. It's a town there, and they were the critical reinforcements. Had they not gotten there, they may not have been able to hold the key or a crucial hill that George Company held throughout the battle, and the war might have been over, literally, by losing the 1st Marine Division.
How do we get stuck up there? And how the Chinese people say, hey, it's the Korean War. I thought we were fighting the North Koreans. How did the Chinese even get involved here? And if you read the book, it's wave after wave after wave. I mean, the poor Chinese soldiers, many of them had no weapons, right? This was just a human wave after wave. It was something, quite frankly, had never been seen in modern warfare before.
The Chinese were under Mao Zedong at this point, and he was determined to destroy the Americans that were in Korea. The North Koreans attacked in the summer of 1950. This is June 25th, 1950, and nearly overran all of South Korea. And the United States came to our aid. And we then came in and held a perimeter called the Pusan Perimeter. And George Company is part of the Great Counterattack, along with the 1st Marine Division, which is reconstituted at the Incheon Landing. This is where MacArthur's masterstroke literally changes the course of the war. The war was going incredibly badly for the United Nations at this point, and they then turn the tide at Incheon, and they take Seoul, and they move up the Korean peninsula. And as they inch their way up, or they move their way up rather rapidly up towards the Chinese border, Mao Zedong is determined to defeat the United Nations or the Americans, and he throws tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of men, which they classify as volunteers, into the fray, and they come across the Yalu River very quietly at night, and they coil around the 8th Army, which is further off into the west of the western part of Korea, and then the 10 Corps, which is the Marines, on the eastern portion of the Korean peninsula. And as the Marines and the Army are making their way to the Yalu, in late November, the Chinese attack, and they attack in devastating force. They surround the 8th Army and nearly annihilate it. It's called the Great Bug Out. The Army has to retreat, and the Marines are in solid position because they set up defensive positions, but they're also surrounded, and they're surrounded on nearly all sides. And this story is just absolutely epic, Steve. I mean, these are men that in George Company, for instance, never received Marine Corps boot camp. They were so-called reservists. And these are men that just went to sort of parade ground training. And many of these guys didn't even know how to throw a grenade. And they're thrust into, this combat. And, this is true grit that Americans, it's epic. They're able to overcome overwhelming odds.
We got about a minute left. Can you tell us where the title tell me that story in a minute about where the title of the book came from?
The title of the book, Give Me Tomorrow, is from, it's photographed is a member of George Company on that cover. David Duncan Douglas, who's one of the most famous combat photographers, asks a member of George Company what he would like for Christmas. And he responds, give me tomorrow. He wants to live another day. And that man on that cover literally almost never did see another day. That night, the Chinese counterattacked with hundreds of men, an entire battalion on their small machine gun position, and nearly overran them, nearly killed them.
Patrick K. O'Donnell, can you hang on for 1 second? I'm taking a short commercial break. I want to finish the story. I want to talk a little bit about Korea and talk about your next book. Also, Liz Yore is going to join us, the Hammer. Liz Yore has actually drafted an executive order for the President of the United States to do what? to designate the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. They're a threat to the Chinese people. They're a threat to the American people. They're an existential threat to our country and to all mankind. Liz Yore and Patrick K. O'Donnell next.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Breaking news, Alabama just announced that they're going to join the Texas lawsuit. I think South Carolina is thinking about it. This is the thing about what Eileen did, this former prosecutor. Get to your attorney general. Make sure your voice is heard. Tell them you want to partner and become a partner with Texas in this amazing lawsuit at the Supreme Court. So everybody take action on that. The book is Give Me Tomorrow. It's about the heroic stand of the Marines at the Chosin Reservoir in the Korean War 70 years ago. And the author is Patrick K. O'Donnell. So Patrick, the young Marine on the cover of your book, did he get a tomorrow?
He did. He survived that night, and he was nearly overwhelmed by a human wave after human wave of Chinese that were attacking that night. And these Chinese soldiers were men of iron as well. They were poorly equipped, had hand-me-down weapons, in some cases no weapons, and poor clothing, but they kept coming and coming, and they had life service in the Chinese army. And many of them were even former Chiang Kai-shek soldiers that we had supported during World War II.
That's what they were. That's what Mao Zedong. He sent them there to die. He sent them there to die. That's where they had no weapons.
He sent them to die, Steve.
He sent them. This was the Nationalist Army under Chiang Kai-shek that had been an American ally. He sent them to Korea to die. Patrick, we got to bounce because we got more breaking news. The book is Give Me Tomorrow. You have another massive book, your second book on the revolution, coming out in the spring. We're going to get you back on, and I want everybody, we're making an announcement right now, the Patrick K. O'Donnell, Stephen K. Bannon Christmas Day special, where every year for, I think, 4 or 5 years in a row, we go through the great historic battles fought in Men in Combat on Christmas Day or around the Christmas season. So, Patrick, what's your Twitter handle? How do people get access to you and your website to get all your books? You can't put a Patrick K. O'Donnell book down.
It's at Combat Historian. Is my Twitter handle, and patrickkodonnell.com is my website.
Everybody get there.
Historian.
Everybody get on his Twitter feed right now. Patrick, thank you so much for coming and helping to commemorate the Marines.
Thank you, Steve.
The Marines' historic stand at the Chosin Reservoir. Also, Mike Walsh's book, Last Stands, has a section on Chosin Reservoir also because of his uncle fought there. Okay, I want to turn now. Talk about the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong. Those Chinese soldiers were sent there to die, okay? Many of those were the Nationalist Army under Chiang Kai-shek that had fought for freedom for the Chinese people for many decades. I want to bring in now Liz Yore, former prosecutor, in the Hammer. What is this letter? And Barr, I don't even know, and I hear today there's some controversy that Pat Cipollone is trying to talk Trump out of firing Wray and firing Barr. You sent this letter. We're going to get it up on the screen, Liz. You sent a letter to Barr. Walk us through this letter, and what were you demanding about assisting President Trump's executive order and to turn the Chinese Communist Party into the designation of a transnational criminal organization?
Well, hi, Steve. Yes, this letter was signed by two major organizations, Save the Persecuted Christians Coalition and the Committee for Present Danger China. And as we are well aware, early on in his presidency, President Trump signed an executive order 13773, which directed law enforcement to put a high priority and devote resources to dismantle transnational criminal organizations and give law enforcement the ability to coordinate together, to pour resources, to be able to extradite these criminals, and to identify them, interdict, disrupt, and dismantle them. And after that incredible executive order, Jeff Sessions immediately identified MS-13 as a transnational organization, the Sinaloa cartel, and Lebanese Hezbollah, and a few others organizations. And what we are asking now, and have been since July, is for Bill Barr to identify and designate the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. This would elevate the criminal activity of the CCP, not only in the United States, but around the world, as one that needs to be interdicted and prosecuted. Now, look, Chris Wray said months ago that he's opening up counterintelligence cases against China every 10 hours, the FBI, every 10 hours. Bill Barr said that 80% of all of the economic espionage cases originate in China. 60% of the trade secret theft cases originate from China in the CCP. Now, that's just the economic blitzkrieg, which is what they're talking about. Now, we have 284,000 deaths from the China virus. We have 30,000 deaths a year from fentanyl-laced opiates, and that's been going on for 10 years. And law enforcement understands that fentanyl comes directly, it's manufactured in China and comes directly from China. I mean, at your last guest, 40,000 men were killed in the Korean War. We're talking about 30,000 deaths of young men and some women in the United States as a result of this China manufactured fentanyl. And so we.
Now you talk about the Sinaloa cartel. The Chinese are now the biggest partners of these cartels. They're blowing drugs up through the southern border into Chicago and up into the Midwest. It's outrageous. They are transnational. They're the biggest threat to the Chinese people, to Lao Beijing, all 100 names. They're a existential threat to the United States. And because of what they've done on this virus, they're a threat to all mankind. It's time now to designate them, to get Wall Street out of business with them, to get corporate America out of business with them. As you saw today in the Daily Mail, this breaking news about these spies that are, in bed with, a term of art, with certain members of the Democratic Party. So this is outrageous. It's time they've been designated. Where does this letter stand? What's the process? We got about 30 seconds, Liz.
Well, Scott Perry, representative from Pennsylvania, has a House Resolution 8491 designating the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational organization. It's got RICO in it. It's got strong denying sovereignty to the CCP if they're operating in criminal activity in the United States. Look, we know that the CCP is an existential threat to America, freedom and liberties. This has got to be the generation that ends it. And the way we do that is by prosecuting these criminal actors in the United States.
Liz, what's your Twitter handle? We got about 10 seconds.
Elizabeth Yore is my Twitter handle, and at Parler as well. And Your Children is my
Thank
website.
you, Liz. Yours. We'll see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m.